The courthouse hallway smelled like disinfectant and old paper, and Elias Mercer felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff with no ground beneath his feet. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, too bright for a day that already felt heavy, illuminating the fine dust in the air and the dark circles under his eyes. This was supposed to be routine, just another custody check, another box to tick in a life that had become nothing but forms, signatures, and silent prayers. He kept telling himself that if he stayed calm, if he followed every rule, he would be fine. But his hands still shook, because everything he loved fit into the outcome of this single day. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Stories like this exist because people still choose compassion, even when life feels impossibly unfair. Elias had learned the language of systems the hard way. He knew how to speak softly to social workers, how to keep his voice steady when they asked questions that felt like accusations, how to smile politely when they glanced around his small apartment looking for signs of failure. Since his wife's sudden death 2 years earlier, every part of his life had been placed under a microscope. He worked mornings at a printing shop, evenings driving deliveries, and nights trying to be both mother and father to a 6-year-old boy named Noah, whose laughter was the only thing that still made the world feel solid. But exhaustion has a way of leaving marks that even love cannot hide, and those marks were what the custody review board had noticed. The nurse assigned to the check arrived just after noon, her presence announced by the soft squeak of sensible shoes on polished floors. Her name was Mara Ellison, though Elias only noticed it later on the paperwork. At first, she was just another professional face, calm and neutral, carrying a tablet and a clipboard like armor. She greeted him with a nod, her expression unreadable, eyes observant without being cold. This was daytime, broad and unforgiving, the kind of light that made it impossible to hide. Elias straightened his shoulders anyway, because he had learned that looking defeated only invited more questions. The check itself was supposed to be simple. A brief health assessment, a review of stress indicators, a few observations to ensure the child's primary caregiver was physically and mentally capable. But simple things become complicated when your heart is involved. As Mara moved through the process, measuring blood pressure, asking about sleep and diet, Elias felt like every answer carried the weight of judgment. He admitted that he slept in fragments, that he drank too much coffee, that some days he felt like he was barely holding everything together. He expected her to note these things, to add them to the growing list of reasons he might be considered unfit. Mara listened without interrupting, her movements steady, her face thoughtful rather than critical. When she looked at him, it wasn't with suspicion but with something closer to recognition, as if she had seen this kind of tired before. The kind that comes not from laziness or neglect, but from loving someone so fiercely that you forget how to take care of yourself. The assessment continued, and still Elias waited for the moment when everything would tip against him. Afterward, they stepped outside into the courtyard, where the winter sun hung low but warm, casting long shadows across the stone benches. Children's voices echoed faintly from a nearby park, a reminder of what was at stake. Elias stood there, hands clasped, feeling smaller than he ever had. This was the point where professionals usually offered polite closure and moved on, leaving him to sit with his fear alone. But Mara didn't turn away. She spoke calmly, her tone gentle but firm, explaining that she had seen the signs of chronic stress and grief, but also the unmistakable signs of devotion. She told him that being overwhelmed did not mean being incapable, that struggling did not erase love or effort. Then, in a moment that would replay in Elias's mind for years to come, she made it clear that she would not simply file a report and disappear. She would recommend support services, counseling resources, and community assistance, and she would personally follow up to ensure he was connected to them. She made him understand, without melodrama, that he was not expected to carry everything alone anymore. Those words didn't fix his problems. They didn't erase the fear or magically grant him rest. But they shifted something inside him, something he hadn't realized had been broken. For the first time since his wife's funeral, Elias felt seen not as a case, but as a person. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were different. The custody board postponed their final decision, citing the need for additional support rather than immediate action. A social worker helped Elias apply for childcare assistance that allowed him to reduce his night shifts. A grief counselor began meeting with him once a week, helping him untangle the guilt and anger he had buried under responsibility. Mara checked in through official channels, her notes always precise, always fair, documenting progress instead of just risk. Daytime became something other than a blur of survival. Elias started walking Noah to school instead of rushing him through breakfast. He noticed the way the sun lit up the boy's hair, the way Noah waved at the crossing guard like they were old friends. Small moments began to stitch themselves together into something resembling stability. There were still bad days, still nights when sleep refused to come, but there was also a growing sense that the ground beneath him was no longer crumbling. Mara remained a steady presence at a distance, never overstepping, never turning professional concern into something else. Yet her belief had started a chain reaction. Elias joined a support group for single parents, where he discovered that his struggles were not unique and his shame was unnecessary. He learned to ask for help without feeling like he was failing. Each step forward felt earned, and that made it real. The final custody review took place on a clear afternoon, sunlight filling the room instead of the sterile gloom Elias remembered. He spoke honestly about his progress and his ongoing challenges, no longer trying to present himself as invulnerable. The board listened. They read the reports, including Mara's detailed assessment that highlighted resilience, improvement, and commitment. When the decision came, it was not dramatic, but it was life-altering. Full custody was maintained, with continued access to support rather than surveillance. Elias walked out of the building holding Noah's hand, the weight on his chest finally light enough to breathe around. The city looked different in the afternoon light, as if colors had returned after a long winter. He understood then that this outcome had not been the result of one heroic effort, but of a single moment of compassion that had opened the door to many others. Life did not turn into a perfect montage after that. There were setbacks, illnesses, unexpected expenses, and days when patience ran thin. But Elias was no longer isolated inside his fear. He had learned that strength could coexist with vulnerability, and that accepting help was not a weakness but an act of love. Noah grew more confident, more secure, sensing the shift even if he could not name it. Months later, Elias would pass the courthouse courtyard again, this time on his way to a community meeting. He paused in the sunlight, remembering the day he had stood there convinced he was about to lose everything. He thought of Mara, of the countless professionals like her who chose to see humanity where systems often failed to. He understood that while one person could not save everyone, one person could change the trajectory of a life simply by refusing to turn away. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can change outcomes and that no one truly has to face their battles alone, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. And before this story ends, leave a comment telling us what second chances mean to you, or who showed up for you when you needed it most. Elias and Noah walked home that day under a bright afternoon sky, their shadows long but steady, moving forward together. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt open, held together by effort, support, and the quiet power of someone who once looked at a tired father in a courthouse hallway and chose compassion over indifference.